The Book Program. Presented by Hannah Murray.
Joining us on the line now from the States is Walt Pilcher, who's now retired from a long and successful career in commerce and broadcasting. He's with us on the book show to talk about his first full-length novel, launched during International Trust Your Government Week. It's called EverybodyShrugged. Welcome to the book show, Walt.
Thank you very much, Hannah.
A pleasure. Thanks very much for joining us. So tell me a bit about your broadcasting career, can you?
Well, mostly it took place in college, although I guess it started in high school with having been influenced by the likes of Bob and Ray. I don't know if those are familiar names to your audience, but they had radio shows here in the States where they just did parodies of everything. And so my friends and I would get on our little tape recorder and make up our own parodies. And that carried over into college, where I volunteered to be on the college radio station, which when we first got there was just a little closed-circuit thing. But then we went to FM and went big time while I was there. And we had a radio program called To Be Announced, because we could never figure out what the right title should be. Partner and I would put on sketches. There was once an eclipse of the moon, so we recreated that right there in the studio. I volunteered to be eclipsed, and my partner was the narrator. So things like that.
Oh, great fun! Was it fun?
Oh, it was a lot of fun.
Yeah. And how about your marketing career?
Well, that was interesting too. I started off with a company that made baby food. I worked on a product called Metrical, which was a dietary product that some of your listeners may have heard of as well some time ago. But where I ended up was in the pantyhose business, or I guess you call them tights, and became the marketing vice president and eventually the president of a company called Legs, and that's the pantyhose and the plastic eggs, again, which many people might remember. Never did much with that overseas, but here in the States it was the largest brand.
Yeah. So how did you come to write this book then?
Well, I guess I've been writing since I was age 11. I was starting off with commercials for Mother Murphy's Moldy Meatballs and the like. I've always been interested in satire, somehow influenced by the likes of James Thurber and Robert Benchley and later Woody Allen and so forth. But satire was my forte. And even in business writing, I would write the occasional false fake memo. For example, one year the nylon crop failed. Well, everybody knows nylon is not a crop; it's a chemical. But I turned it into a crop and wrote a memo that I circulated around the company, talking about how there might be a shortage of pantyhose and prices might go up and that sort of thing. So satire was fun. And I've always had a kind of a love-hate relationship with authority. I respect authority, but I believe we should always question it, especially if it's the government. So at the time I started writing this novel, which was some years ago, the government seemed to be interested in finding things that were harmful to your health and wanting to outlaw stuff like or limit or tax things like alcohol and caffeine, chemicals in makeup, and then, eggs are bad, and now eggs are good, and now eggs are bad again. We're going to limit all that. So it just struck me that there might be a way to write something about what happens if you take this impetus by the government to control everything, particularly things that are fun to do, including, tight underwear, sexy underwear, hot dogs, you name it, and ban all of it, and including banning weapons, weapons of mass destruction, weapons of war. So I set up this situation where the government is banning all this stuff, including the weapons of war, and so the Army doesn't have anything to do. The government has turned over the defense of the country to countries like Peru and Honduras, and yet there's still this group of retired generals in the Army who somehow still have offices in the Pentagon that they come in 2 or 3 days a week, and they say, no, our mission is still to protect the country. So while all this research is going on, sponsored by the government, to identify and outlaw harmful substances, these generals set up a command called MADCOM, and it's designed to steal the harmful substance research and turn it into weapons, turn the harmful substance into weapons. So you've got these two things playing against each other, the Army trying to weaponize the research and the researchers trying to come up with more and more things to ban, and it all comes together with a crash in the novel.
So when you're saying making weapons out of the harmful things, you mean things like bacon and butter and coffee and beer and that kind of thing?
That's right. Imagine a tobacco bomb, putting large amounts of caffeine in the enemy's water supply so that they go crazy. Ridiculous things like that.
Yeah, fantastic. I love it. So tell me about your main character.
Well, I really have two main characters, and it's one reason I think that I had so much trouble finding a publisher for the book, and only the great folks at Fantastic Books Publishing saw the potential for this thing. The first main character is a guy named Major Tony Farina. He's a Vietnam veteran. He was involved in a questionable activity in Vietnam involving a combat incident that went wrong. Nobody really got hurt, but it was one of those things that the Army had to cover up by promoting him, which happens quite a lot. But he's the one that these generals decide to put in command of the MADCOM thing to research or steal the research and weaponize the harmful substances. The other main character is a guy named Dr. Gardy Lavager, who is a university professor who is a fanatic about finding these harmful substances, and he and his assistant George Smith have a laboratory at a university in Southern California, and they determine what's harmful, and they run off to Congress, and Congress bans whatever it is. The main way that they determine what's harmful is they feed stuff to rats, and if the rats die, then it must be harmful. So if you can imagine, for example, colored crepe paper, if you feed a lot of colored crepe paper to a bunch of rats and they die, then that crepe paper must be outlawed. So again, we have the absurdity of all this, and these two characters who don't know each other at the beginning of the novel, working at cross purposes until they finally do intersect in a way that would be a spoiler if I gave it away.
Oh yes, don't give it away. So where does the title "Everybody Shrugged" come from?
I guess I have to give a nod to Ayn Rand from Atlas Shrugged. Now, her novel was much more serious than this, but it really had to do with government overreach. And I thought that while there were some responsible people in that novel, my novel would be one where actually nobody's responsible and nobody's actually normal and everybody's actually nuts. And so Everybody Shrugged made sense.
Yes, I like it. And I'm surprised that there is such a thing as International Trust Your Government Week, suggesting that we shouldn't do that anyway. Do you know what I mean? The fact that there's a day about it, reminding people that we should trust our government, is an odd thing, don't you think?
Well, I would have thought it was odd before I made it up.
Oh, that's funny. Okay, I didn't realise that. I was going to say that's a really odd thing.
Dan Grubb, the publisher over at Fantastic Books, said, we really ought to launch this in connection with some sort of a holiday that makes sense. So I went online and looked up all these holidays, and there are a bunch of ridiculous ones as well as legitimate ones. And I couldn't find one that made sense, so I just made it up, and he liked it, so we went with it.
Oh, brilliant. I like it even more. So so I'm assuming that your general sort of consensus is that we shouldn't be trusting our governments. You're challenging them all the time, are you?
I think that's what we should be doing, and it doesn't really matter which political party's in power. I have my leanings, of course, as most of us do, one way or the other, but it really doesn't matter. I think they should be questioned at all times and challenged.
It's surprising how many people don't, isn't it?
I guess you're right. It probably is surprising. But what's going on now, of course, is that everybody seems to be challenging everything. So it's I really don't know what to make of all that.
Yes, it's in the States, you mean?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, no, people do. And around the world, more so than ever before, perhaps, looking at the States and one particular country. I don't think the rest of the world and Europe have had much or as much interest in American politics as they have done in the last year or so.
Well, I'm sure that's true, and I think that we may even be seeing some fallout from some of what's going on here over there. For example, the Brexit vote strikes me as being something that might have been somehow informed by what's going on here.
That's interesting. Well, have you enjoyed writing this book?
Oh, very much so. It's a lot of fun.
And do you think there'll be more?
Oh, yeah. In fact, there is already one more that the fantastic books people are looking at. They haven't made a decision about it, but I'm hoping that they'll buy it.
Oh, great stuff. Well, good luck with that. In the meantime, if people want to get a copy of Everybody Shrugged, it's available to buy in the TRE bookshop section on our website, tre.radio. It's by Walt Pilcher, who we've been chatting to today. Walt, thank you very much for joining us.
You're very welcome. Thank you for having me.
The Book Program. Presented by Hannah Murray.
TRE.